Happy Tuesday to everybody. We have a special live stream event. We're here with Thomas, I hope I don't butcher your name, Gunvaldsen of Arendal Sound. How you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing awesome, Gene. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I love having you guys on the channel. I love dropping the knowledge of the products, but also you guys have some good engineering chops that you make very interesting products. Something that we've reviewed very favorably in the past, whether it's your monitors or your towers or your subwoofers. We see a lot of good engineering across the board. And I'd like to, pick your brain on some stuff about company philosophy and the 1961 series versus 1723 series. I want to get some answers for questions. We've got lots of comments here, people asking questions about your products. And we've got the 1961 Tower giveaway winner to announce, which we will do at the end of the live stream. If you're going to enter that contest, I think you could still enter it in the next 20 or 30 minutes. I think it might still be open, but best of luck to everybody that has entered that. But Thomas, basically, why don't you tell us who you are and what your position is at the company?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for everyone that's tuning on an interview and getting to know a little more about us and who we are at Arendal Sound. So my name is Thomas. As Gene just mentioned, I'm the product manager here at Arendal Sound. So my main job is kind of holding our new product ideas kind of by the hand from the stage where it's just an idea until it's a finished product produced and ready for you to buy.
Gotcha.
So yeah, a little more about me. I've had a passion for audio since I was a kid, basically. My father had some JBL monitors and a record player in the living room, which really just fascinated me as a young kid growing up. We built a speaker together, I remember, and I was like 10 years or something. That also, I think, just puts even more fire under this for me. Then I got my first car, and that's where I kind of dove into the deep end of now I really want a system in this car. So first it started off, something that just played loud, and at the end of the kind of the audio career in my car, I had stripped all the interior out, and I was building like a sound quality system for competition use in Europe with something we called EMMA. I think I have something in the US called IASCA, which is like a similar kind of a thing.
Okay.
And then from there, it kind of transitioned over to home audio. And I was looking at these really fancy, expensive speakers that I could never afford. And I was thinking, I want to know how to make this stuff. How can I get awesome sound in my own living room, by knowing how to make this from scratch. And that kind of went over to being a hobby of mine, building speakers, and then it became more of a passion. And then later, I guess you could say kind of more of an obsession of sorts. At one point, I had my shed full of drivers. I was building a speaker for myself that I went to China and then visited some manufacturers for speakers, because I had plans to really make my own thing at 23. So I luckily kind of got down to earth and realized I'm way out on my depths here, and I really don't have the experience to do all this. So I think luckily I scratched all those plans. Not so long after, I had a friend that worked in L Sound, which was the company that Jan founded back in 2005. And he asked me, "Hey, do you want to start working with audio?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure I do." So yeah, we did an interview, and we seemed to hit it off, and I started working with Jan back in 2012. So that's now 10 years ago. We just had our anniversary a couple of weeks ago. We had some cake, so that was nice. And then not so long after I started working in L Sound, that's when we started, the whole ideas and concepts of what's Arendal Sound today, really.
Gotcha. Wow, 10 years. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so here's the next question that we want to throw up here. Is Arendal Sound a home cinema brand or a stereo brand, or is it both?
I think some customers may look at us from an outside perspective and see the THX certified 1723 speakers and then think that we're a home cinema brand. And obviously also we do the full surround system. So I can understand that perspective. But we don't have design thinking in that we're making a home cinema speaker. We're just making speakers that sound great, that have great dynamics, that have low distortion, and frankly just sound good.
Mhm.
And then when you make a speaker within kind of these principles, I at least think that it's not necessarily just a good home theater speaker or just a good stereo speaker, but it can be both. I think there are some exceptions, a speaker that would be better suited for music and one that would be better suited for home cinema, and not the other way. But we are focusing on engineering principles where you have a pretty good linear dispersion of the speaker, and that just makes it sound more evenly throughout different room acoustics, which I think enables our speaker designs to sound good for both. So.
Yeah,
Um,
I've done videos in the past that I basically said a good speaker will set if it sounds good for music, it'll sound good for home theater as well. But if you have a speaker that's pretty poor and it may sound okay for home theater, it doesn't sound great for music. And because we spend more time focusing on the quality of sound, I think, when we listen to music, especially if it's two channel. Once you throw on a bunch of speakers, you got a 7.1.4 system. The bad speaker kind of hides itself because you've got multiple sound sources all around the room playing music. So it's a bad speaker is more forgivable in that situation, but a bad
Yeah.
speaker is not forgivable in two channel. So if you make a speaker that sounds great for two channel, chances are, as long as it has a dynamic capability, it's going to excel very well for home theater as well. And that's kind of how I see your brand as we started reviewing your products as a two channel set of speakers. And I think it was a 1723 monitor James Larson reviewed, and he was just blown away by its dynamic capability, by its performance, by its sound quality, and how well it just mates with a couple of subwoofers as a result.
Spot on there, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I guess this leads into the next question. Tell us about your design principles, your design goals for the brand.
Yeah, I think the top priority for us in all our speaker and subwoofer designs is they have to be really dynamically capable. And in that, I don't just mean that they need to reproduce the low to high signal that goes on in the recording, but I also kind of include that it has to have a really good transient response within that term, so that the speaker doesn't have a lot of decay after a sound is emitted, which will make it sound tight and taut instead of boomy and kind of sluggish. So that is, I think, one of the most important factors for us, so that you really get the kind of the vibe and the feeling when you're listening to music and your foot starts moving a little. And then secondly, I would say low distortion. That's something we're always trying to aim for. I don't necessarily think that low distortion is something in and of itself that makes a speaker sound great, because I've heard examples of speakers with really low distortion that really doesn't sound good. And on the other hand, I've heard speakers with significantly more distortion that sounds definitely pretty good. So from my perspective, it's more like if you have speaker A and speaker B and they're designed pretty similarly, but the drivers are better in one versus the other, so you have lower distortion. The typical thing that you're here is not that one stands out as being much better than the other, but one is just it just has this lower noise floor of the whole sound of it. It's like it got like a blacker background, or what will you? Kind of like an amplifier that has just a lower noise floor altogether.
Yeah. Well, you know, I wanted to pull up a measurement real quick on the 1723 subwoofer. Now, this is a ported sub, and it's got 2 drivers in it. And this is a measurement called group delay that we do in our reports. And if a subwoofer is well behaved, the group delay will be under a cycle. And arguably, if it's under a cycle, it's inaudible at all frequencies. And you can see here that your subwoofer is really well behaved because that 1 cycle mark is the kind of light blue trace. And then your sub is below that. And typically for vented subs, we see that group delay go up pretty high at and below the tuning frequency. And some companies put a really aggressive high pass filter that just sends that above a cycle and a half. And as a result, it can make the sub sound, like you were saying, boomy or sloppy. And you can see here that's not the case with your sub. This is an example of really well executed engineering here for a vented system.
Yeah, I mean that's something we have high regard for subwoofers and speakers together, achieving just the most accurate reproduction of sound, really. And I think the next point I would say that's really a standout for us is linearity of frequency response, and not just on axis, but also the dispersion that goes on off axis, from top to bottom of the frequency range, really.
Right.
And that's why you will see these waveguides in all our designs, because we're controlling the dispersion at the crossover point between the mid range and what goes on from there and up. Without this waveguide, it's very difficult to have a really linear behavior in this region. So that's one of our kind of key hallmarks, I would say.
Yeah, you're basically talking. You're talking about directivity matching between the mid range and the tweeter. And guys, that's very beneficial, especially if you're in a lively room. First of all, they're controlling the vertical dispersion characteristics of the speaker, and then you have predictable off-axis characteristics for the speaker as well. So you tend to need less room treatments, or the speaker will play better in most rooms as a result when it's behaved like that. And like Thomas is saying, some of the very best speaker designs today use a waveguide approach like you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, it also makes it kind of behave as it should if you apply EQ to, anywhere in this region. If there's something that's, you have a peak in this region in your listening position, and you EQ it down, the speaker will behave like it should, kind of, because you have a very even frequency response on the full, or let's say the full sound power of the speaker in that area.
Yeah, it's a great point. So the next question we have here, and then we'll get to some of the user questions or the people that are on the forum as well. But okay, so I hear this a lot about your brand. How come you guys don't have a dedicated center channel? You basically have a two-way or an MTM and you turn it horizontal. And we've written several articles on this topic, and there's been a lot of chatter on the forums for decades. I think sometimes MTMs get a bad rap because they're you get a lobing effect when they're horizontally placed. But in reality, that speaker can still behave really well if it's executed properly, at least 15 to 20 degrees off axis. And by the time you're more than 20 degrees off axis in a typical small room, you're probably close to a sidewall, which is not a great experience anyways. But I guess the question I have for you is, why don't you guys have a dedicated three-way center channel like a WTMW instead of just an MTM?
Yeah, and good question. Thanks for asking. I also seen quite a few people on forums writing about this topic. From our perspective, I will get a little deeper into this maybe later on kind of more on the design process. But we're not focusing just on a center by itself. We're focusing on making a full system of speakers that need to have the proper timbre between them, so that when the sound pans from right to left, and it goes all the way around you. It should sound like it's the same type of speaker, or the same speaker really, giving the sound, so that there's nothing that kind of sticks out to you in the home cinema system. We are making when we're designing our speakers, we're typically firstly focusing on the towers. The towers are one of the most important speakers in the system. It's the one that you will buy if you're buying for a music setup. And that will kind of dictate a lot of what happens on all the other speakers around, right? So as you said, a three-way with a tweeter and then a mid-range and then woofers will probably have better off-axis dispersion, right? Now, if we were to incorporate no waveguide, but just a tweeter and then a smaller mid-range and then two woofers in our center, it won't sound like any of the other speakers any longer in that series. So right off the bat, you're off, especially for the guy that sits in the main listening position and wants the best sound.
Yeah.
He will kind of get something that sounds a little off from the center stage in that setup. Now we could also use the mid-range that we have under, and then the waveguide with the tweeter above, but that would look like a Franken monster of a
big. Yeah.
which I'm not sure how many people would buy it, to be honest. It would just look a little off in that setting. And I think also for us, it's about making the right trade-offs, right? In the whole speaker series that you're creating, it's all about when I hear someone saying this is a compromise-free speaker, or whatever, that's a lot of BS, frankly. It's all about making the right compromises for the customers we want to kind of target at, and for ourselves, and throughout the system.
Yeah.
So I think what we've done is we've created a two-way center, an MTM, and we have dragged the crossover frequency really low, which means you're getting away from the worst part of the lobing, really, when you're getting off axis, and then squeezing the mid-ranges as close as we can to the waveguide, which means you will have a pretty good behavior up to 20-25 degrees off axis. And when you're sitting as far as you mentioned, also as 20-25, even 30 degrees off axis in the cinema, the center not having a perfect frequency response is just one of the compromises you have made already, because you're just mostly hearing the right or the left side in the cinema. So from our perspective, we will rather have a uniform sound throughout the system, making sure that the guy that bought the system, the guy that sits in the middle of the system, he gets really the absolute best performance. And then if you're aunt or friend or whatever that doesn't really care that much about sound, sits on the way out on the side, it's kind of a compromise that's okay in our opinion.
Well, that's the other benefit of the waveguide that we didn't talk about before, is when you put a waveguide on a tweeter like you're doing, and you already have a very capable tweeter that's able to handle a lot of power, and it's got a good high pass filter on it, so it won't blow out very easily at all. But that waveguide is actually increasing the low frequency sensitivity, and it allows you to cross over that tweeter lower than it would if you didn't have that waveguide, right?
Yeah, definitely a lot lower, frankly, and it has less distortion in the same area at any given output. So if we didn't have the waveguide there, we would probably have to set the crossover at somewhere around 2.5K instead of 1.5K.
Oh yeah,
which is that's a pretty significant difference there.
Yep. So this is an interesting question. I hear this a lot, and I think it's worth addressing. And this applies to any brand of speaker. It's not just to your brand, but people often wonder, why should I get a pair of your towers as opposed to a bookshelf if I'm going to have subwoofers anyway, and I'm going to base manage those speakers? Is it a waste of money to get the tower?
That's a great question. From a perspective of just looking at the frequency response in and of itself, the bookshelf and the subwoofer would be the obvious solution, right? Because that's cheaper. and the bookshelves are smaller. So yeah, there may be a little more living room friendly in that sense if you're putting this in a living room. But they definitely don't sound the same, and there are some I think pretty big advantages with going for a tower instead of the bookshelf. Firstly, right off the bat, you'll have a lot higher sensitivity on the towers, which means your amplifier doesn't need to be as powerful to achieve the same output. You will have lower distortion. You have, in our speakers, we have 4 woofers covering, all the band down to the crossover frequency with the subwoofer in this case, which will just have a different impact in room in terms of how it couples with your room, but also it gives you a lot more headroom than the single woofer in a bookshelf will. So even if you cross it over pretty high, let's say 120 hertz, you will reduce the amount of output the single woofer in the bookshelf has to do, but still it just has more capability in the tower, and it just it also has slower distortion, obviously, with 4 woofers doing the same job as one. They almost don't have to move to give the same SPL.
Yeah. Yeah, guys. So here's the thing. If you're going to choose between a bookshelf or a tower, it's room dependent. It's how big is your room? How loud do you listen? Because let's say the bookshelf speaker is only capable of 95, maybe 100 dB. If it's a really special bookshelf, it has multiple woofers. But then you go and buy these subwoofers that put out 120 dB of bass. There's a huge disparity in dynamic range from between where the subwoofer kicks in and where the bookshelf speaker kicks in. So if you want to match dynamic range between your bass and the rest of your frequency range, you really need to have a tower or a multi-driver system like this, or like a 1723 that's very capable at 80 hertz and above, to give you that output and that dynamic range that you're getting from your subwoofers. So if you listen loud and you're in a big room, there's huge advantages to having a multi-driver, larger speaker as opposed to a small bookshelf speaker. And actually, even if you bass manage it, if you cross it over at 80 hertz, it's not like the speaker's shutting off below at 79 hertz, right? It's a second order roll off. So it's a gradual roll off. You're still getting that mid bass from it. And a big speaker hits differently. I'm sorry to say, but when you listen to a speaker that has high sensitivity and excuse me, and it's something that's capable of putting out that much sound, it just sounds different. It sounds more lifelike. It sounds more dynamic, at least to me and to people that I've had over and done demonstrations between small and big speakers. Obviously, you want to size the speaker appropriate to the room, but if you want the ultimate in dynamics and lifelike sound quality, there are lots of advantages to big speakers, even if you're bass managing them.
Yeah. And even on top of that, if you have a pair of towers in the front, you have more flexibility in terms of placement of the subwoofer because you can cross it off lower, right? So if you have a small bookshelf that can, comfortably go down to 120 hertz and not so much lower, and you place the subwoofer behind somewhere in your room and you're mainly playing music, you will definitely hear that the subwoofer's coming from behind you. Now, if you have a pair of towers in front and you cross it over lower, that may not be the case anymore. It may sound more like everything is coming from the front of the room.
Yeah, you definitely get a better blend when you have a speaker. Your LCRs are more capable at 80 hertz and below, for sure. One question I have for you guys is you have 2 series of products. Can you tell me what does the 1961 series borrow from the 1723? Because I think the 1723 came out first, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
why don't you kind of tell us the difference between the 2 series and the technologies that the 1961s borrow from the 1723?
Yeah. So I think, frankly, if the design would have been like the 1723s in terms of the aesthetics, we could have called 961 series 1723 super small or something like that. It's basically using the whole concept and ideas from 1723 and just making it even more living room friendly. In a smaller package, we're using 5.5-inch woofers versus 8-inch on the big 1723, and then 6.5-inch on the S series 1723. But it's paper cones. We have designed them the same way we do the drivers on the 1723s. The tweeter is also 28 millimeters, same size, still using a waveguide. And we've put so much thought into getting the sound and the timbre of 961s as close as we can to 1723, so that even if you want to have, let's say, a big front stage 1723, and then you just want to have some small surrounds in the back, you'll be plenty fine of using 961 there and then 1723 in front, and they will sound coherent. They will sound like they come from the same series in a sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, still using HDF cabinets like we do on the other speakers, just because it has less coloration than going with MDF or softer materials. Premium parts everywhere, still painted. Yeah, I mean, basically it's a smaller version, and with a little less size comes also a slightly lower price. So hey, for everyone that wants a speaker in the living room that looks a little maybe friendlier to the wife, then I think that's a great way to go.
Gotcha. I'm going to throw up a couple of questions here from viewers. This one is, what aspects of speaker do you see others get wrong that you aim to really hit the mark?
That could be a lot of things, to be honest. But I think the main and the biggest one for us is that we really push on hitting proper dynamics on our products. That's one of the things when I hear another speaker or subwoofer from other brands that doesn't have the same kind of impact and an ability to still play loud and having that same kind of dynamic presence, that really is one of the main things that makes me think that that's a shame.
Yeah, that's the one thing I noticed when we first learned about your speakers is you guys really offer a lot of dynamic output for the money. I mean, you'll see some of the esoteric brands that just don't give you the sensitivity or the dynamic output capability. I mean, obviously the THX rating really shows you that this speaker is capable. And lately, over the last couple of years, some of the best measuring speakers we've measured have been THX Ultra or even the Dominus level certified. It's no coincidence. I mean, there's a lot of engineering involved in making a product that can meet that standard. And hats off to you guys for incorporating that into products that are more down to earth pricing.
Appreciate that, and I completely agree. I think it's easier to make a product just if you're only focusing on it sounding good and not really caring about how loud it plays. That's fair, easy. Or on the other hand, just making a product that plays really loud. That's also fairly easy if you don't have to take any regard for the other way. But making a product that sounds great and that can still play really loud with a really low distortion for that's when it starts getting tricky, and that's when you have to have these massive cabinets and whatnot to reduce resonances.
And big motors on your drivers and, not skimping on the crossovers and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
We got a super chat here I'm going to throw up. Isaac, what amplifiers do you recommend for the 1761, 1723 towers? Should I have a high current amp? And I guess that's a good question, because a lot of manufacturers lie about the impedance of their towers, right? They claim it's 8 ohm compatible, which is a bunch of BS. When you put 3 woofers in parallel with each other, how are you getting 8 ohms? Even if they're 12 ohm woofers, you're not getting 8 ohms, right? So most towers are really 4 ohm towers, or they're 6 ohm, but their impedance minima is 80% of that, which would be in the 4 ohm range. So obviously you want to have an amplifier that has the ability to drive 4 ohm loads. When you agree with that, when you're dealing with your towers, at least?
Yeah, definitely. I think any modern receiver will kind of do the job, but if you're looking at really maximizing the sound and output from your speakers, a dedicated power amplifier that's properly designed to handle, you know, a 4 ohm load, that's definitely a big advantage. I think there are many amplifiers currently that would do a great job with our speakers. They're not really critical of having to sound any certain way, but we don't have a certain sound in our speakers. We just try to make them sound, you know, neutral and natural. And if you have a good amp with good output capabilities that has, you know, good control of the speakers, then I think you're off to a good start. So yeah, you know, Encore, the design amplifiers, they typically sound great. I've
Yeah, you're
heard
talking about
many.
Class D. You're talking about Class D, basically. Yeah.
Yes, Class D amps. There's a bunch of Class AB amps that would sound great. Also, I have.
Oh yeah.
You know, in different price categories, I think they sound awesome. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of amps I could name, but
oh sure, yeah. But bottom line, guys, if you're choosing a tower speaker like one of these that are high dynamic output, multi-driver, try to have a amplifier that's safely rated to 4 ohms. And if you have if you have an AVR and you have preamp outputs on it, get a 3-channel amp just to run the front 3 LCRs, and then use the internal amps for everything else. You'll take a lot of strain off your receiver, and you'll give those speakers that high current that they are demanding when they're doing large transients, especially in the mid bass region as well. Now, here's an interesting comment, not a question. If possible, I highly recommend using the same 3 speakers for LCR. A dedicated center is fine, but I don't believe can match the identical awesomeness. And that's a great point. So yeah, you don't have a 3-way center channel, but you've got those monitors. You got the 1723 monitor and the 1961 monitor. If you could orient all 3 of those speakers vertically, put them behind an acoustically transparent screen, that will be identical awesomeness.
It will.
And I suggest using that in one of your banners, identical awesomeness.
That's a good point. I will take that with the marketing team.
For sure. Let's see, I'm just trying to sift through some of these. I guess we're going to announce the winner of the contest. We just got that information in, but I'm going to give you guys a little bit more suspense and answer some more of these questions first. Okay, let's see. I have a 1723 center S along with the 1723 tower S with 1961 surrounds. I get a 10 dB increase in the 105 to 200 hertz region from the center S, which do challenge the male voices. Is this normal?
So that will completely depend on placement and how you have it set up. If you have it on top of like a low board kind of situation, you will typically get some boost in this area, which can easily be mitigated with some EQ. Frankly.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. If you guys have a receiver that has the ability to edit the EQ curves, whether it's Odyssey, room correction, or Dirac, definitely take advantage of that, because these speakers are very EQ friendly, as we were talking about before.
Yeah, definitely.
I went from towers to bookshelves in a large room. I don't crank it to reference, but I often do miss having full-size towers. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that for sure. There's just larger speakers just hit much differently.
They do. They just have a different impact.
Yeah. Okay, here's a good question.
Using a sub.
Does the 1961 meet THX standard without paying for the stamp? Can you actually say that if it does?
Let me put it this way. We had the 1723 range out there for more than a year before we put a stamp or did any measurements on it, and we haven't changed anything after we did. And we didn't want to pay for the stamp on the 1961s because we wanted it to be as price competitive as possible. So while THX, of course, can't approve or say anything, I would just say that it meets the standards of how we have designed all the other speakers, all our other ranges.
Yeah, so say nothing, act casual. You guys have a really good product on your hand. All right, here's a good one. In a scale of 10, what what you rate 1961 and 1723 in comparison in terms of quality sound. Now, my understanding is the quality of sound, it's not so much the quality of the sound, but it's more the dynamic output capabilities, right? I mean, because you're kind of voicing all your speakers to sound as similarly good as
Yep,
they can.
definitely. So if we say the big tower is a 10, and then the scaling down will mainly be because it doesn't have as much output capabilities and well, kind of oomph and dynamic force really. So if you go down a step to 1723S tower and then down to 961 tower, they will sound almost the same throughout the range. It's just that you have less deep end extension and less output capabilities, especially in the bass area.
Right. So I'm going to put you on the spot now because someone asked this. It's not me asking you, so I can't say, I can't let any cats out of any bags. Do you have plans on keeping these 3 lineups for a few years, or are you introducing a new line of product in the near future?
That's a good question. We have no plans of moving away from our existing product lines. Who knows what will come in the future? There's always some fun stuff on the drawing tables here, so to speak, but nothing that's really competing with our current offerings.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we're going to get you next time to double down on that question. Someone's asking if you're using a sub, is it better to have the towers closed? I guess they mean sealing the ports. And that really depends on what kind of sub you're using. If you're using a ported subwoofer, then you probably want to leave the tower ports open and just bass manage. But if you're mixing and matching subs that are sealed with ported speakers, you might want to seal those ports. I've had issues where when I've run speakers full range, if they don't have the same bass alignment as my subs, you start getting cancellations right below the tuning frequency.
Yeah, so this will also depend on how sophisticated the DSP is and kind of what happens after the crossover point. When you have the ports open, you typically have more boost, the lower you go. And if you have a 12 dB roll off, you will still have, kind of an output boost after the crossover frequency. Whereas with a sealed version, you may be having too little of an output. So it just depends on placement and what you can do with your DSP. But yeah, I agree with you on your statement there.
Yeah. So here's a question I've had for you guys for a while now. Can we expect voice matched in ceiling 1723 immersive speakers? So in other words, are you ever going to have flush mount speakers for the high channels?
This is kind of moving along what I just talked about. Like we may have some stuff on the table that is not competing with current stuff. No, I can't really go into detail. It's something we've discussed time and time again, to be honest, because we had quite a few customers that want in-wall speakers and in-ceiling speakers because they want to have maybe the fronts or maybe the rears or maybe the Atmos speakers in their system and have standalones for the other. So it's a well-received message, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, because it is a challenge to stick speakers on a ceiling, right? For Atmos. It doesn't, if people don't have a dedicated listening space, it's a challenge to have something hanging off the ceiling. So you could put speakers in the front and the back of the room on the front and rear walls, but that's not really suited well for Atmos. You really want to have those speakers in the ceiling, more in a near field environment around the listening area to get that true immersive effect of how the movies are being mixed. So it would be great if you guys had an in-ceiling speaker down the road. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that, at least in the United States, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of our customers that would love that.
Someone wants to see that driver behind you up close.
I was just waiting for someone to ask. So this is a 1723 S driver. We even put a nice rubber
Oh yeah,
around the whole magnet here.
Yeah.
just because we like the looks of it. Nobody sees it, but it's
Is that driver magnetically shielded, or is that just an aesthetic cup over
No,
it?
it's just an aesthetic thing. It's not a shield, so
Wow, so that's a pretty big
it could,
motor.
yeah, it's a really hefty motor for a 6.5 inch.
Yeah.
There's some power in this thing.
Well, how big is the
Um,
voice coil? What's the diameter of the voice coil? Is it like an
it's
inch and a
two,
half?
yeah, it's just under 2 inches, 1.75
Oh, wow.
by my memory. So it's we've frankly on all our driver designs, we've focused on trying to get the voice coil as small as possible, while others are bragging that they're making them as big as they can. And the reason why we try and make them small is because you have a lot less moving mass. So
Yeah.
the problems with a small voice coil is power handling, right? So
Yep.
it's just about finding ways to mitigate the air all around the voice coil and having a voice coil wire that handles the heat, and also the glue and the sealant on the wire. That is where kind of the magic happens, a lot of it. And then we have all this. I don't know if you can see this on through
Yeah,
the.
let me zoom in on you.
Okay,
There you
you
go.
can see there are some holes there, just
Yep.
in the cone itself, in the cone body. So
Yep.
these are basically vents, right? And then you have a vent under here, and you have a fully vented under the spider.
Yeah.
And this is all just to move the air around to avoid overheating the voice coil when you're really stressing it, and also to avoid any compression within the magnet gap.
Yeah. What's the cone material in your drivers?
We're using paper cones on all the woofers. On subwoofers, it's a mix. On the biggest one, it's a fiberglass and paper mix. We think paper has just awesome qualities in terms of going to the upper spectrum, especially of the
Mhm.
mid-range, where it just behaves so nicely. There are very little issues with breakups, and especially with the coating that we applied to them.
Yeah.
And paper just sounds natural. There's got like a really neutral tone to it.
And it's a light material, so
It's very
that's why
light.
you have good sensitivity. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We try really getting down the moving mass of the drivers, which is one of the big factors, I think, of the feeling of how dynamic the sound is, and the
Yep.
group delay that you showed.
So shout out to Arendal customer service. I had an issue with a damaged woofer on one of my towers, and Arendal didn't hesitate to make it right. Thank you to Thomas. Top-notch service. Yeah, I mean, customer service is a big thing with companies, and I've heard lots of good stories about you guys. So that's one
That's
of the reasons why we're working with you. You make good
that's
products.
awesome to hear. We're
Yeah.
really taking pride in our customer service or customer support team. It's frankly one of the places where we invest the most in, so that our customers have the best experience before and after the sales, and we're always here to help whatever happens.
Yep. So I guess we should announce the winner of the 1961 towers. As you guys know, we were promoting this contest for you since we announced this live stream, and appreciate everybody participating. And here is the winner. His name is Jeff. I hope I don't pronounce his name wrong. Jeff Wallig, and he's in Massachusetts. So Jeff, I'm sure you guys are going to be reaching out to him, right?
Yep, definitely.
Awesome.
You will hear from us, Jeff. Congrats.
Congrats, Jeff. You are getting yourself an awesome pair of towers. I don't know if you're watching this right now or if you're just going to get contacted separately, but please leave a comment in this chat if you are, and let us know how you like the towers when you get them. There we go.
Yeah, congrats.
All right. Well, Thomas, I think that wraps it up. I think we covered a lot of ground here. We're going to definitely have you guys back next month, and hopefully you can talk about some of these questions on the new products I've been asking and other people have been asking here as well. We always appreciate new info from you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Gene.
Last question here. Is there any way to audition Arendal, or is it purely in-home trial period? You guys why don't you talk quickly about your in-home trial period, because it's a pretty generous one.
Yep, we have a 60-day audition period, risk-free, 100%. So you just go and add to cart, and the thing shows up on your doorstep. You get to test it out for 60 days, and if you're not happy with it, you just write to us on our customer support, and we'll arrange a pickup and get it back to us.
I mean, that's
Full refund.
awesome to have basically 2 full months to try it out in your own listening environment to see how you like it. That speaks
Yeah.
volumes for, you know, how you guys see your product. You're very confident in your product if it can handle a 2-month return window. That's awesome.
Definitely, and I think it's just a different, experience getting to try the speakers and subwoofers in your own home, in your own room,
Yeah.
going and listening in a showroom that may be completely different than the acoustics that you have at home.
And you guys have a pretty long warranty period, even on your subwoofer amplifiers, right? What is it? Is it 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years on all subwoofer amplifiers, and then we have 10 years on 1723 speakers, everything, and 10 years on 1723 subwoofer cabinets and drivers.
Let me tell you guys something. You can't stress the importance of that warranty period enough, especially for plate amplifiers on subwoofers, which I found to be the least reliable components in home theater. So to get a 5-year warranty on a plate amp when you normally get 1 year by competitors, it's well worth it. Even if you have to spend a few $100s more on an Arendal subwoofer versus a competitor. Always look at that warranty period on the plate amplifier. Really worth it.
It's a big thing. We're lucky enough that we have really over-engineered these amps, though, so we luckily stay away from too much issues.
All right. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up the live stream here. Thomas, again, I appreciate you dropping some knowledge about the brand. Guys, I'll link up some of the reviews in the description below, and stay tuned for more contest announcements coming to Audioholics. We are going to be giving away more products, and maybe Arendal will participate again next year. I'm putting you guys on the spot again to do another shower giveaway.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Gene. It's a pleasure.
All right, guys. Well, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics or ask questions. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.